Welcome to Season 4 of SheVentures. I am your host, Doria Lavanino. SheVentures is a podcast about women who are pivoting in their lives and careers. We live in a world where women of color founders raise 0.5% of all venture capital in 2020, and women overall, a paltry 2.2%. This podcast is about elevating women's voices. Our new website, SheVenturesPodcast.com, provides resources, actionable tips, mentorship, and community. We do not subscribe to the idea that there is a dearth of fundable ideas from women. There is no pipeline problem. There may be a visibility problem, and that is what we are here to fix together. Let's talk about the reality of women, money, entrepreneurship, and work-life balance on this season of SheVentures. I met this woman for the first time about 5 years ago in a cafe in Brooklyn to talk about financial wellness as I embarked on my first entrepreneurial journey, co-founding Sensei. She had just passed the Certified Financial Education Instructor exam and was contemplating her next moves. And at the time, she was thinking about creating a curriculum for women who were, like her, survivors of an abusive relationship. Not to sound corny, and mind you, I'm pretty sure I am at least 2 decades her senior, I found myself in awe of her charisma and her intelligence as I sat across the table from her. Fast forward to today, I've watched her become an internationally recognized speaker, a millennial money expert, a financial educator, a best-selling author, while building her businesses, My Fab Finance and Club Loofah. She works hard and smart. Last year, she earned 7 figures, and I love that she talks about the importance of building generational wealth. She's authentic and owns her truth. Combined with her business acumen, her faith, and her humility, in my mind, she is unstoppable. Can you tell I admire her a little bit? She's here today to speak about her career and life pivots and hopefully let some of her magic dust float our direction in the form of inspiration and lessons learned. Tonya Rapley, welcome to SheVentures.
Doria, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that intro. Oh, I'm emotional. Thank you.
It was heartfelt. And you're one of those women who I look up to, and I am amazed by everything that you do and how intentional you are. And I wanted to ask you some things that I don't know about you and wondered if you could share a childhood experience that shaped or influenced you.
Well, I would say my mother and father were career military. That came with stability, but it also came with a certain amount of instability because my mother was a flight mechanic for her first couple years in the service, and then she became a flight instructor that required her to travel around. I remember she had to go to Korea for a year when we had just moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. My dad had just retired from the military. My mom had decided to stay in a little longer than him. And we had just relocated to Charlotte from Oklahoma City. It was a huge culture adjustment for me. My mom had to go to Korea for a year amidst that transition. I was 15 years old. I was coming into, 15 to 16 it's a big leap for a lot of girls, going from middle school to high school, and my mother was gone. And I remember saying, you can't get out of it. You can't quit. You can't tell them you're not going. How can they send you? You have 2 daughters. And my mom kept saying, I have to go. I have to go. At that moment, I realized I didn't ever want to have a career or occupation that required me to leave my children when I didn't want to. That inspired me to become a full-time entrepreneur. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't have family members who were entrepreneurs. My parents were training me up to be a traditional employee. And I took that path for a good amount of time because I just didn't know how to do things otherwise, even though I had all these business ideas and everything. That really, really sat with me to the point where I didn't have children until I was far enough along in my entrepreneurial journey so that I could give them the childhood that I felt like I didn't have because my parents were consistently required to travel.
I relate to that so much in the sense of having children and wanting to give them the things that we feel we did not have. Most people know the public Tonya Rapley. Can you tell listeners a little bit about the private Tonya Rapley? For example, what does a typical Saturday morning look like for you these days, or does it vary greatly?
It varies greatly. It depends. So, me and my husband are navigating a divorce. My Saturday looks differently whether I have custody of our child that day or if he does. The days that are Kara's Saturdays, we usually wake up, we prepare breakfast, we decide on what activity we're going to do for the day. He's part of a mom group here. He's in swim. I'm part of a mom group. Kara's in swim lessons. So usually, if I have him, my day is dictated by him, unless there's
Absolutely.
something where I'm going to our rental property or something that I can take him with me on. But usually, it's with him. Now, if I do not have him, a Saturday, usually it looks like me just relaxing and sleeping in, honestly. It's funny because even though I'm an entrepreneur and I dominate my schedule and I can kind of take off when I want, I do typically adhere to a 5-day work week, or maybe actually I typically adhere to like a 3.5, 4-day work week because I usually only work totally 3.5 to 4 days out the work week. But my weekends, usually some of the brand partners that I'm working with, or I respect the boundaries of my team. So I try not to work on weekends.
I'm also separated from my daughter's father. And the one thing I will say that is an advantage in my mind today is the fact that I get every other weekend, quote unquote, to myself, which is incredibly valuable. I'm not saying I'm not advocating for divorce for that reason, but if you happen to find yourself in that situation, that was an unexpected gift for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Dory. I mean, I like you said, I'm not advocating for it, but I get more breaks now. I get more breaks to be like, because, and this is not a bash men session or anything like that, but I feel like as women, we kind of take over the maternal duties in a household. We take responsibility, even if we have a partner. And so that is actually a time where we can take it off and be like, nope, you're in charge right now. They are with you. I am not interceding. I am going off and doing what I want to do. And so I've been enjoying it.
Yes, I'm so happy to hear that. So you mentioned your parents and your background, and you knew that you wanted to become an entrepreneur, but when did that really crystallize for you into action?
Not until I started my business in 2013 and I saw a path forward. Up until then, I had other business ideas, but nothing was really sustainable, or I didn't have the tools needed to really execute the vision. Prior to becoming a financial educator, I worked in nonprofit, and to supplement my income as nonprofit, I did everything from starting a online vintage boutique with friends.
I had no idea. So cool.
Yeah, called Cooper Lane. Me and my friend Giovanna had an online vintage boutique. Her Cooper for her mom's maiden name, Lane for my mom's maiden name. I did that with her. When I first moved to New York City, I actually had a music blog and I managed a violinist during that time. I did a few things and I took a break. And I think that I really do advocate for people who want to become an entrepreneur but aren't sure what they should be doing, to give yourself the time to take a break and sometimes go into the workforce, because that's what I did. I went back into the workforce and was working at the nonprofit, and the idea for My Fab Finance slowly revealed itself because I was creating programming for low income women, created a finance workshop, started my own financial journey and started sharing that, and realized that people needed financial advice from the perspective of someone who didn't come from a finance background. That's when My Fab Finance was born. That came out of saying, I'm not going to continue to try to force entrepreneurship or starting my own business. I'm going to go back into the workforce and let it reveal itself to me.
My Fab Finance is an amazing resource. I look at it, I love it. Can you tell listeners about your, I wrote wealth building journey, but I guess financial story from where you started, because you're very open about the fact that you started with the low credit score and you were also in an abusive relationship. And it was an evolution, I would imagine, also personally as well as professionally to where you are today. I guess I'm wondering, what were like the first steps?
For me, I want to test anything that I offer to people. For me, I need to be my first client. I need to see it work. I need to have that example of, or the proof of concept in my own life. My Fab Finance, it started with myself. It's like, Tonya, can you effectively coach yourself? And do your strategies work for effectively coaching yourself? Once I realized those worked, then I began sharing them with others and coaching other people on their financial goal. And the same as I build out my personal brand. So with My Fab Finance, I've been doing it since 2013. I'm going on 10 years. I became a certified financial educator and at the end of 2014, went full time in 2015. So I've been doing it for quite a bit of time. There's so many more layers to me. And that involved creating my personal brand. And now as I create my personal brand, I find myself doing the same thing, even as I'm navigating this transition from being married to divorced. How do I use the pieces of my story, my own experience to empower other women? And my personal brand is currently all about that, helping high achieving women design lives that align with their truest values and really allow them to operate as powerfully as they can with confidence and ease. It's taking a similar trajectory. That implement it yourself, test it, try it out, do different things, tweak the process, work with a few people at a small scale to make sure that it is effective, tweak it from there, and then scale it. That's my recipe. Do it on you, then help others, tweak it, and then offer it to others.
You have probably taken like an MBA course and simplified it in 3 sentences. I mean, I don't have an MBA, but like, honestly, you're so right. People have become kind of so esoteric about products and testing them out and product market fit and blah, 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 blah. They make it so technical, but like, honestly, you're right. If it works for you, try it with other people, see how it might need to evolve, if at all. Then if it is something that is sustainable and is helping others, I love how you put it.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's effective for me. And that allows me to show up in a way that I feel like honors my integrity. I don't ever want to offer or sell something that I didn't do myself. I don't ever want to build a business on something that I can't do myself or that I am not completely confident that it is effective and impactful. This works for me.
How has being a woman of color influenced your mission?
I think that I use it as an asset. And so one of the things that I look at it as is it's my authenticity asset. It allows me to show up exactly as who I am. I'm often in spaces where there aren't a lot of women who look like me, especially in the finance industry. And I realize it's like, okay, it's going to be one of the things that makes me remarkable in this space, whether it's being a woman of color, whether it's being a woman in a male dominated space, whether it's being a woman of Latina descent or whatever your unique thing is, own that because it makes you remarkable and people remember you when they interact with you or when they recall scenarios such as when I first met Doria, as she said at the top of this podcast. But it also demands a certain responsibility for me to my audience and understanding and compassion of their unique experience, as well as ensuring that that unique experience is communicated with the brand partners that I work with. I feel responsible that people understand that there is a perspective that is being brought to the table that is shared by myself and other women. And when I speak to you, I'm not only speaking as myself, but other women who share this experience with me as well. And I want to make sure that I bring us to the table whenever I'm at these tables that we've traditionally been excluded from.
Yes, that is all I can say to that. You've built an internationally recognized personal brand. As you said, you focused on that as well and are focusing on it and continue to focus on it. You also have incredible engagement, I've noticed on social media. And I wonder now if part of that is in that recipe that you described of ensuring that what you do works for others and being authentic and showing up and you engage with people. You don't just broadcast, you engage.
It's part of building that community. And if I'm being transparent, one of the things that I want to work on even more this year is just continuing to foster that community because we are nothing, especially as content creators and entrepreneurs, we are only as strong as the communities that support our mission and our brand. It's because of my community I've become internationally recognized speaker or Amazon bestseller because they support what I do. I'm here in service of them as well as myself. And I think that that's also a reframing that I had to do from early on, is that I thought it was all about my community, but I've also built this business to serve me. That requires that I create a space where I can show up being myself and being, the layered version of myself comfortably and without having to worry about, extreme repercussions. Everybody's not going to agree with the things I say, the things I do, the things that my community manager says or does. But our goal is to do that with the idea or with the intention that those who resonate with our message will stay around. Those who feel like they finally see me for the challenges that I've had and the struggles that I have, and they'll stay around and they'll become active members of our community. I feel like we do have a strong community online and we do have engagement, but my goal this year is actually to improve that. That's where I feel like it's one of my weaker spots.
Wow, if that is a weaker spot, I'd like to know what your greatest strength is. That now, do you have any do's or don'ts for entrepreneurs who may be starting out building their brands who look up to you?
I would say you see where I am today, but I would say study the beginning of my journey, because sometimes people try to replicate where someone is because they meet them at that space without understanding, no, what was I doing 7 years ago when I started this website? I was only focusing on that. I was taking every opportunity. I was consistent with creating content. So yeah, you might not see me post, but every 2 to 3 days now on my personal Instagram, but that's because when I first got started, I was posting 2 to 3 times a day. I was extremely consistent early on and then earned the trust of my audience where it allowed me to relax somewhat and then begin to move into the life flow that I wanted. So I would say study the early days of entrepreneurs. Don't study where they are right now, because that's going to show you how they got to where they are and how you can move in the direction of where they were. If there's one thing I would say, it's just that I focused on one thing. You mentioned some of the brands that I have my hands in. I have Club Loofah. I have my personal brand. I have My Fab Finance. And My Fab Finance started all of that before I added the different elements. I created My Fab Finance in 2013. I bought Club Loofah in 2019. I launched my personal brand in 2017. So there was still a chunk of time that was allocated to just focusing on My Fab Finance. And to be honest, we're still tweaking it. We're still working on how to make that better. We're still making adjustments. So that's the next thing, is like what you start with does not have to be your final iteration, and it will not be your final iteration, because as you learn what you like, as you learn what your audience needs, it will evolve. And I would encourage people to also staff according to the needs of the direction in which their business is growing eventually.
That makes so much sense, not to overstaff or understaff, but be able to see where you're headed, or at least be open to it and move along with it, not resist it unless it's something that you really dislike. If your business is going the way that you feel it can manifest with integrity, then that's great.
Exactly. And that's the goal, is for us to operate with, my goal is to operate with integrity. I think that's a responsibility that we have for the audiences that trust us.
This is a question that I'm curious about personally, but you can just tell me to bugger off if you want. Between the three brand or the four, you have a number of revenue streams, right? But I was curious last year, could you share not the numbers, but the percentage wise, what was the biggest source of revenue for you?
The biggest source of revenue for me was brand partnerships. About 60% of that was brand partnerships. The rest was book sales, course sales, my coaching programs, affiliate income, and licensing income.
And you're also doing a lot of coaching as well, but not, as I understand it, not personal coaching. It's course coaching with you in it, but not one-on-one, right?
So I don't do one-on-one in any of my strategies, but I'm actually going to be opening up my VIP days once a quarter, because there are some people who do want to work with me to create their own, whether it's growing their finance business, whether it's growing a brand, whether it's growing a business strategy. And I realize I do have a knack for that. And after doing this for so many years, that's the only one-on-one coaching option I will offer, but that's going to be at a premium price point. But everything else that I offer is the one-to-many model. And so with My Fab Finance, we have our boot camp. which I taught last year, and I'll be teaching the boot camp that we do. Actually, we're starting our next boot camp next week. I'll be teaching that, but I'm onboarding coaches now that will be coaching within the boot camp. I'm slowly phasing myself out of that so that it can operate on its own. And then with my personal brand, hands-on. I'm hands-on. I have a program called the 30-Day Shift where I work with women for 30 days to help them dramatically create a shift from where they are to where they want to go. We create that plan and start to get them taking action. That creates momentum for them to finish their goals. That's something I'm personally working in now because I'm in the learning phase of teaching within that. And then my signature event, Design Your Life Day. So I'm slowly moving it, but it's still the one-to-many model for both brands.
Which is scalable, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, and it gives you time to focus on what you really want to focus on, which is great.
One-to-one, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Motherhood. How has that pivot changed you, and how has it affected your personal and professional goals?
Oh, motherhood. I was motherhood minded before I even had my son. Like I said, that was one of the reasons that I wanted to become an entrepreneur. But I have to be more mindful of my time. Whereas when I was an entrepreneur that did not have a son, I could work until 6 a.m. and sleep the entire day if I wanted to finish a deadline. My son, I can't do that because he's going to be up at 8 o'clock, ready to go, ready for the world.
Like it
And
or not.
so, yes, like it's like, no, get back in bed. No, he does not understand that. For me, it has been or had been my time. That's been the biggest impact, my time. And also me wanting to create more time for him, me wanting to say, no, I'm taking a week off and taking my son to Florida and we're going to spend time in Florida. Or after I had him, I don't want to travel as much. I'm not going to get on the road and do as many speaking engagements as I did before I had him. And it changes with each age group or with each age, with his age. So it changes with his age. The things that I did early on while he was an infant, where I was nursing and he wasn't walking, are different now that he's a toddler that has opinions and interests and talks. I had a podcast that I did last week. I had to take him with me because his father was traveling. My nanny was overwhelmed. And I had to take him with me. And I had to explain, like, my son's here. He might run in and out of this podcast. He might affect my train of thought, but this is what we're going to have to do. It's required a lot of flexibility on my part and the individuals that work with me, but it also has demanded that I rely on my team more. And when I say my team, that is the people that I've hired to support me in my business, the people who are in my family, whether that's his father, my parents, my sister, and the people that I've hired to support him, which is his nanny. I have to delegate more. I have to communicate effectively my needs and forecast my needs, as well as be comfortable and confident that I can rely on them without having the mom guilt that I'm doing something wrong by focusing on what my needs are in that moment.
I have suffered from mom guilt. After my first daughter was born, she's now 17, almost 18. I went back after 10 weeks because I was just like, I am not made for this at home thing. It's just not for me. And it's not at all talking down to moms who want to stay at home. I think it's an amazing choice if you can do it. But I had a lot of guilt no matter what I did, whether I worked, whether I stayed at home. And it sounds like you've given a lot of thought to how you've navigated that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have.
I admire that.
But I'm still not perfect. I still have the mom guilt, and I have those friends that remind me that I had a friend. I was on a panel. And I was like, I have mom guilt that I missed my son's first dentist appointment because I had a speaking engagement. But it was a speaking engagement that paid me exceptionally well, literally $1,000 a minute. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make this. One of the things that she told me, she's like, your son is 3 years old. He is not going to say at 18 years old, he is not going to pick a fight with you because you missed his first dental appointment. He's not even going to remember this. She's like, that's important to you. And that's okay that it's important to you, but don't place it on him. And I have to remind myself that sometimes, like, okay, he's fine. He's happy. He's supported. He has the village that you put in place to support him. Release the guilt and do what you need to do because it's not serving anybody.
You mentioned that you're going through a divorce. Is there any advice that you have for entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs who are navigating that life change?
One of the best pieces of advice I got was try to avoid making any major life changes if it's not necessary. I think that sometimes when we go through divorce, we want to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're like, I want to get rid of all this. No, I'm moving out. I'm doing all this. And someone told me, make your life as simple as possible right now. I really focused on simplicity and doing things step by step by step. Having other people who have navigated it or are navigating it has been really helpful outside of legal counsel, because they are like, these are things that save me money. These are the things that create a peace of mind. These are the things that we didn't think about. So having those candid and honest conversations with people, I think that when we're going through divorce, and I know initially I felt like a failure. I felt like, oh my gosh, I wasn't able to keep my marriage together. But for me, it wasn't that. It was, no, you could have stayed, but you wanted to choose something better and model something. But you wanted to choose, I won't say something better, but you wanted peace, and you wanted to model peace for your son, and you wanted to create a life that truly aligned with your values, and your marriage no longer fit into that. And that is okay. You did not fail. If anything, you are courageous for choosing yourself and choosing your happiness and choosing what you feel like is best for your son. I really had to reframe that. And then once I started to reframe that, I was able to focus on, okay, this is what we need to do.
How long of a time did it take from the initial seeds of kind of knowing that that was the direction the universe was taking you to action? Because I know that many people, including myself, existed for years in ambivalence.
Yep. It was about 2 years. It was about 2 years for me. And I think that's also why I was in a good position, because mentally I was like, okay, just in case this isn't forever, because this isn't the thing that is going to be your forever, you need to be planning for what it could look like after this. So it allowed me to properly plan.
Interesting. You did that like as you were getting married, so in the back of your mind?
Well, no, me and him were married for 6 years. So we were 4 years into our marriage, and I was kind of like, okay, this might not be forever. And there were some other things. There were things that he did that made me it wasn't, I just woke up. It was also like, okay, this person is capable of this and I don't like it. All right, what does this mean for my future? And what does this mean that I could comfortably and confidently move forward with a long-term future with this person, knowing what they're capable of?
Moving back to business, and I have just 5 more questions, because when I heard that $1,000 a minute, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to waste your time. What is the best and what is the most regrettable business decision that Tonya Rapley has made to date?
The best decision was becoming a full-time entrepreneur. Absolutely. The best decision was becoming a full-time entrepreneur. The most regrettable decision. That's a good question. I think I just frame it as life. Things that I regret in the moment, I frame as life lessons. I don't really know if I truly regret anything other than financial choices I made, not taking advantage of earning an income or earning a salary and buying investment properties early, getting into that early on. I think that is a mistake that I made. I definitely wish I would have done that. So I would say investing early on, investing in assets that would appreciate in value, that I could be generating positive passive cash flow off of right now. I wasted a lot of money early on in my younger years. I was focused on living, which I'm happy I did that too. I'm very happy I did that. I moved to New York City at 24 and was like after going to college in Miami, Florida, and I was focused on living and getting the most that I could out of life. So I'm happy that I did that, but I wish that I would have been more intentional about creating the framework for passive income at that time.
Great answer, and so useful for everyone. Who are the women that you look up to, and where do you find your inspiration during hard times?
Yeah, I mean, I have entrepreneurial friends that I look up to, and I look up to people for different things. I have one of my friends, her name is Tony Jones. She's reinvented herself. She's peaceful. I look up to people for the peace that they have, or the clarity that they have in their decision making, or how confident they are in their person. For me, that's an accomplishment. I think that a lot of us, if we take consistent action, we can be successful in what we want to be successful in. But it's more work to be happy with the person you are and the way that you show up with the world, and confident and unwavering. So those are the women I tend to look up to. Like I said, my friend Tony Jones, it's a woman, her name is Lizzie Jeff. I look up to early on, especially before I became a mother, moms who were modeling how I could become a successful mompreneur. So one of my friends, Maddie James, another friend, Patrice Washington. I also look up to other women business owners. So Jacqueline Johnson, Create and Cultivate, Brit and Co., my friend Savitra Wilson of Resilia, Morgan DeBon of Thinkific, other women who have successfully created successful businesses. I love the everyday winner. You know, people say like Oprah and everything else. She's great, but I don't know her life. I like people where I know their life and I know personally how they interact with others and the way in which they conduct themselves. And I'm inspired by that.
It's interesting you say that about Oprah, because I used to ask at the end of my podcast, if there's one woman that you could have lunch with, who would it be? And it was either, I would say Oprah was number one, Michelle Obama, number two, and once I got Condoleezza Rice. So I thought it was really interesting that they were all women of color, but it was Oprah, Oprah, Oprah. And to your point, we really don't know anything about Oprah. I'm sure she's amazing and has had her own trials and tribulations, as we know. But right, it's like the everyday women who do amazing things.
It's the everyday women. And I think that there's something valuable about meeting people before they arrive at the level of excellence that they are, because they're still in the day to day. And even myself, I'm thankful that I have my team, because we were offering a program and I realized I've been doing this for almost 10 years now. And I realized how far I was from the woman who started My Fab Finance. We were offering a program. I was like, it's only $397. My assistant reminded me, like, Tonya, that's a lift for some people. They have to plan for that. And where I'm at, $350, like I paid it like $400. I'm like, here. But that's because I've grown to that place. And it reminded me of the value of interacting with someone who is still kind of they aren't far removed from those days where they were in the trenches, where they were doing the work, where they were pulling themselves out. So for me, it's most valuable to talk to people who just pulled themselves out. If I'm going to have dinner with anybody, and I mean, I think or lunch, if I'm answering that question, I would say someone who could give me direct advice based on my business and how they scaled there. So Amy Porterfield, someone who I feel could give me direct, specific, tangible walk away items from, not inspiration. I don't need to have lunch or dinner with somebody who's going to fill me with inspiration. I need like someone who's going to say, hey, I see how you've been operating your business. I've been following you on social. And I think that these are the things that you could do to really improve your processes or the way that you show up for your audience. That's who I want to have lunch with.
I love it. Always growing. Where can listeners learn more about you, as if no one knows about you, but you never know. There might be someone.
You never know. And I hope I'm somebody's new BFF in their head. So my personal brand is Tonya.Rapley. It's Tonya.Rapley. And that's where I'm doing a lot of the work and where I share a lot of the women behind the businesses that I've built. That's where I share a lot about my motherhood journey. That's where I'm sharing about the path to choosing myself and choosing my own joy and my own happiness and creating a value aligned life. And where I share how I curate peace in my day to day. But then there's also My Fab Finance, where I talk about financial education that is managed by my social media manager and my team. So you can find us at My Fab Finance or at Tonya.Rapley. For anybody who is interested in working with me on the personal brand format or the personal growth area, and they're like, I'm ready to shift my life, you can find that at Tonya.Rapley. We'll be opening up the 30-day shift in July. So we're collecting the wait list now for anybody who's interested in working with me.
I may be signing up for that one. That
I
sounds
would love to have
cool.
you in there. And you know, what we're doing this, I actually want to say, like, one of the biggest compliments to me is people who have worked with me before signing up to work with me again. While we were doing this podcast, one of the women who was in my 30-day shift and we had a great experience signed up for my Fab Finance bootcamp. So for me, that's such a tremendous compliment where you've worked with me before. You worked with me for 30 days and it was so valuable that you turn around and want to work with me for 8 weeks. I really take ownership of the women that I work with. I'm far removed from the days where I had to think twice about spending $300, $400 on something, but I'm not far removed from the desire to want to create impact in people's lives. And any interaction that I have with I don't want to call them a client because they really become family, has to have integrity and it has to be the way I would want to be treated by someone who I was trusting to work with me.
And you're intentional. And that's what I love about you. You're intentional and your integrity. And that is something that either shines through or it doesn't, right? And I really just look up to you, and I can't wait to see what comes next. And maybe I'll learn about it in July when I learn more about my own journey.
Yes, I'm excited for you. I'm really excited for you. And I think that, we go through all these things, and I would say I'm one of the people who I'm my own student. It makes me think about, like going forward, I might create something for women who are transitioning from divorce, because that's a whole nother life leap.
Oh, absolutely. I think there is so much to be done there. Tonya, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share my story.
You've been listening to SheVentures. Like what you heard? You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a show.